Imagine you're sitting in seat 12B of a commercial airliner.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right, so you're cruising at 30,000 feet, you're sipping your ginger ale, when suddenly the engines just start sputtering.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it's bad. The cabin lights flicker, the plane takes this sharp, terrifying dip,
Hmm.
and, you're waiting for the pilot to grab the yoke, bank the plane, and execute some heroic emergency landing.
Like Sully on the Hudson.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But instead, the pilot comes over the intercom, clears their throat, and begins to read aloud from a beautifully bound, perfectly formatted 500-page engineering manual.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah. Just reading about how the engines were, theoretically designed to withstand this exact altitude. I mean, the pilot isn't actually flying the plane.
Right.
They're just proving to you that the paperwork is flawless.
It's a jarring image, but it actually captures the reality of what happens inside a lot of major financial institutions when the pressure is suddenly dialed up.
Right.
We see this persistent tendency to, crave the comfort of the manual. Executive teams rely on the illusion of safety that comes from a perfectly structured document, while completely ignoring the fact that the ground is rushing up to meet them.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are heading into the high-stakes world of financial risk management. Our mission today is to unpack a very specific, Treasury-focused document, the ICAAP Credibility Overview.
Yes, a crucial one.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at the mechanics of capital adequacy and, more importantly, revealing why the very frameworks institutions rely on to survive stress might be fundamentally flawed.
Exactly, because we aren't just talking about financial paperwork today.
Right, no.
We are talking about human psychology, management credibility, and really the literal survival mechanics of modern banking. For anyone managing a balance sheet, this is the crux of the issue.
It really is.
We're examining what happens when the theoretical models on a spreadsheet suddenly become very real, very immediate threats to an institution's liquidity.
So we're talking about the Internal Capital Adequacy Assessment Process, the ICAAP. And for anyone operating in this space, the ICAAP is this exhaustive framework an institution uses to prove it has the capital buffers to survive severe economic headwinds.
Right, it's the ultimate stress test.
Exactly. But the central mystery we're exploring today is why an overwhelming number of these ICAAPs, these meticulously crafted frameworks, are failing the ultimate credibility test with regulators.
Yeah, they're falling completely flat.
Right, despite the math being sound.
And the industry actually refers to this as the credibility gap. For years, the prevailing assumption was that if the quantitative models were defensible,
Check the boxes, right?
yeah, if the scenarios were severe enough and the checklists were done, you were safe. You submitted the framework, the regulator reviewed the capital ratios, and you moved on.
But that's changed.
Radically. The regulatory grading curve has fundamentally shifted. The baseline assumption is no longer just about the math.
Regulators are evaluating management credibility now. They're actively judging whether leaders can steer capital. They walk into these boardrooms and ask, does management actually understand their own vulnerabilities?
Exactly.
Wait, so you can have perfect paperwork and still fail?
Oh, absolutely.
It brings to mind buying a top-of-the-line gym membership. You get the moisture-wicking clothes, you hire a nutritionist.
And you get the whole setup.
Yeah. You download the app that tracks your macros perfectly. You have this beautifully documented spreadsheet of exactly which machines you're going to use every day. But then the trainers at the gym watch you, and they realize you don't actually know how to lift a single weight.
Yeah.
You step up to the barbell, and you just freeze. Your documentation is flawless, but your actual operational capability is zero.
What's fascinating here is how that physical paralysis mirrors the psychological trap of modern risk management.
Oh, interesting.
Regulators have recognized that a comprehensive, mathematically flawless ICAAP is essentially useless if the management team is just, going through the motions of a compliance exercise.
Right.
The true test, the only metric that actually matters when market liquidity evaporates, is whether the C-suite possesses the active, practiced capability to steer capital when things go wrong.
And steering capital in a stressed environment, we are talking about theoretical tweaks.
No, not at all. We are talking about halting dividends, which instantly tanks your stock price.
Ouch.
Yeah. Or executing fire sales on prized portfolios to generate immediate liquidity.
And the paralysis happens because those decisions are inherently destructive to the short-term perception of the bank, right?
Exactly. If an executive team has only ever modeled a dividend halt in a sandbox environment,
Like a fire drill.
right, they're going to hesitate when the actual trigger is breached. They'll spend precious days debating whether the stress event is real or temporary.
And in that delay, the window to save the institution just closes.
Precisely. Regulators are essentially acting like those personal trainers watching the lifter freeze. They look past the Tier 1 capital ratio projections, they look the CFO in the eye, and they demand proof of execution.
And if they blink?
If they blink, or if they instinctively defer to the chief risk officer for a page number in the submission, they fail the credibility test. The framework becomes a shield against accountability.
They use technical correctness to hide from operational reality.
Yes.
And this source we're looking at highlights a specific warning. Institutions fall into the trap of being technically correct, but operationally detached.
That phrase is key.
Yeah, let's dwell on that for a second. Operationally detached, because I want to push back on behalf of the compliance and risk departments out there.
Go for it.
Isn't being technically correct the entire point of banking compliance?
Whoa.
I mean, if the regulatory requirement is to maintain a specific liquidity coverage ratio, and my internal modeling shows I'm maintaining it, I'm technically correct.
Sure, on paper.
It's like the speed limit, right? If the speed limit is 65 miles per hour and my speedometer says exactly 65, I am technically correct. The highway patrol doesn't pull me over and say, your speed is compliant, but I don't feel you're operationally attached to the concept of the road.
That's a fair argument.
It just feels like that introduces a massive layer of subjectivity into a process that was supposed to be purely quantitative.
It is a vital pushback, but it forces us to clarify the ultimate purpose of the ICAAP. If we view capital adequacy purely as a compliance exercise, like a speed limit on a predictable highway, then sure, technical correctness is sufficient.
But it's not a predictable highway.
Exactly. Navigating a localized liquidity crisis isn't driving on a paved highway. It's off-roading in a blizzard.
Oh, wow.
And if you're off-roading in a blizzard, being technically correct about the torque specifications of your transmission doesn't keep you alive.
No, it doesn't.
What keeps you alive is a forward-looking strategy. Like, where are the drop-offs? If we lose traction on the front axle, how exactly will we distribute power? Regulators are penalizing banks for treating the ICAAP like a vehicle registration document.
Instead of a survival manual for the blizzard?
Precisely. It requires a crucial shift in thinking. The ICAAP has to evolve from a backward-looking compliance report into a forward-looking management framework.
It has to sit right at the intersection of strategy and risk.
Right. When management is operationally detached, it usually means the quantitative analysts built a brilliant stress testing model, but the line of business heads issuing the loans haven't integrated those parameters at all.
They're completely siloed.
The siloing of risk and strategy is the fatal disconnect. You have people generating revenue operating under one set of assumptions, and the risk people reporting on a completely different timeline.
And regulators spot this.
Instantly. If they ask board of directors, hey, if your commercial real estate portfolio takes a 20% hit tomorrow, what's your sequence of countermeasures?
Let me guess, the board freezes.
They freeze, or they have to consult the risk committee's quarterly report. That means the institution is operationally detached. The strategy and the risk framework are occupying two entirely separate realities.
So we need to bring this out of the theoretical. A concrete example of what operational attachment actually looks like.
Sure.
Because the source notes outline this specific use case of a mid-size institution that actually managed to fix this.
Yes, that's a great example.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They completely rebuilt their stress framework, and the pivotal move was aligning their recovery plan to real triggers.
Real, actionable triggers.
Yeah, they abandoned lagging macroeconomic indicators as their primary tripwires. I mean, it's shockingly common for institutions to tie their emergency response to broad metrics like a drop in national GDP or trailing unemployment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, using a lagging indicator like official GDP data as a recovery trigger is, quite frankly, operationally useless.
Right, because of the delay.
Exactly. By the time a national GDP contraction is officially reported, the underlying economic damage has been compounding for, 6 months?
Yeah, you're already in the hole.
If your recovery plan only activates when retrospective data confirms a recession, your liquidity buffers are likely already compromised.
Your asset valuations have already tanked.
It's a passive, ineffective trigger. It tells management they have already crashed rather than warning them they're drifting out of their lane.
It's like an alarm that only rings when the fire has already consumed the building.
Perfect analogy.
So to create real triggers, this mid-sized institution had to tie their alerts directly to the idiosyncratic bleeding-edge reality of their own portfolio,
Yes, hyper-specific alerts.
like setting a trigger based on the internal liquidity profiles of their top 50 corporate clients dropping by a certain percentage within a 30-day window.
Exactly. Or tracking regional product-specific deposit outflows on a T+1 basis.
And setting an automatic escalation protocol if those outflows breach a threshold for 3 days straight.
Those idiosyncratic triggers represent a fundamental shift from passive observation to active management.
It sounds like a lot of work, though.
Oh, it requires immense operational discipline. Setting up a data architecture that can surface a top 50 client liquidity drop in near real time. That means the Treasury Department's daily liquidity reporting must be seamlessly integrated with the risk management dashboard.
So the chief risk officer and the CFO are finally looking at the exact same data flows.
Yes. And by linking the framework to real, actionable triggers, this institution closed the credibility gap.
Because the executives no longer have the luxury of being operationally detached. When a specific portfolio-level trigger is breached on a Tuesday afternoon, the emergency committee has to convene and make a tactical decision right then.
Right. It turns a dead document into a living, breathing alarm system.
Like a nervous system.
Ugh.
If you touch a hot stove, your nervous system doesn't wait to write a quarterly report on tissue damage.
No, the localized trigger fires instantly.
And you pull your hand back. That is what this mid-sized bank built.
And when regulators conduct their exams and see that management is actively monitoring these idiosyncratic triggers,
They pass the test.
they pass. Because the C-suite has the operational authority and the practiced intuition to execute countermeasures before the stress event impacts the broader market.
But this requires a profound cultural restructuring, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The risk personnel designing the framework must be embedded with the trader desks and the lending teams. The framework exists to dictate human action under duress, not satisfy a checklist.
So what does this all mean? We've looked at the failure of perfect documentation, the psychology of executive paralysis, and the vital importance of real triggers. For anyone operating in financial services, the grand takeaway from the source is absolute. ICAAP is fundamentally a decision framework.
That's the core thesis. It is a structured methodology for making impossibly hard decisions under extreme time-compressed duress.
Right.
The ultimate question every CFO, treasurer, risk officer, and bank board must answer is, can management anticipate risks and act early?
Do they have the real-time data to see the localized stress?
Exactly. And do they have the credibility to execute the painful countermeasures required to protect the institution's capital base?
So if you're managing a Treasury department or sitting on a risk committee and you recognize that your own institution's framework might be suffering from this exact disconnect, you have to proactively address that operational gap.
You really do.
And the specific call to action from the text is this: to explore these concepts further and transition a static compliance document into a forward-looking strategy. Connect with Dipak Khot and FinGig.Pro.
They specialize in the exact operational and cultural shifts required to close the credibility gap.
Because as we've seen, aligning your risk architecture with your strategic operations isn't just best practice anymore.
No, it's a baseline requirement for institutional survival.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Because looking at this shift from pure quantitative compliance to subjective management credibility, it raises a massive question about the human architecture of these institutions.
It really forces us to reconsider the baseline profile of the executive banking role.
Right. We've established that regulators are increasingly prioritizing operational intuition and crisis management.
Which is a huge pivot, because historically, the industry has heavily favored the pure technicians.
The quantitative analysts.
Yeah.
The executives who could engineer mathematically flawless models and navigate complex regulatory paperwork.
Exactly. The safe bet for a C-suite appointment was the technician who understood every nuance of the capital models.
But if flawless modeling is no longer sufficient to pass the credibility test,
Then we may be looking at a fundamental shift in executive hiring. Will the boards of tomorrow pivot away from the pure number crunchers and instead recruit, strategic forecasters?
the people who operate more like military tacticians than traditional accountants?
Will they prioritize leaders who possess a higher tolerance for ambiguity, who excel in rapid, intuitive decision-making?
That completely upends the traditional banking hierarchy.
It does.
The ideal leader is no longer the person who can perfectly recite the engineering manual while the turbulence hits.
No. The ideal leader is the one who knows when the models have failed, drops the manual, and has the practiced intuition to actually fly the plane.
Wow. Keep that dynamic in mind as you assess your own institutional frameworks. Keep questioning the operational reality behind the documentation, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.